Ben and Neal back again for Mock in a Box. It's 2020. We had some episodes in the pipeline, but we realized that all of them were face-to-face mock trial, tips and tricks of the trade for in-person mock trials. And if you competed in mock trial or you're anywhere near it in 2020, you realized, that we went online into Zoom. So did we. We went online. Our teams competed. We observed, coached, or judged cumulatively 50 plus rounds, 100 plus hours of mock trial. We took home some hardware. We took home some trophies, some individual awards. We think that we've got some tips for you on how to adapt to this new medium of mock trial. It's new for everybody, including us. So we wanted to release this before the meat of the episodes that we've been working on. We will release those, so stay tuned for those. But for now, we're here to talk about Zoom mock trial.
Well, Ben, I think one of the first things to talk about with Zoom mock trial, it's not just mock trial on Zoom, right? Because one of the things we had to figure out is what's this going to look like? And, is it just live streaming, say, a direct examination? Or is everyone on individual screens in different rooms? And I'm sure each individual competing organization in different states is going to potentially handle that differently. But I would say for the most part, having seen both collegiate level and high school level, this is not live streaming directs or crosses. This is everybody on individual screens. So to me, this is Zoom mock trial. It's not mock trial on Zoom, if that distinction makes sense.
Yeah, I even saw a couple rounds where you would have one computer in one room full of attorneys and one computer in another room full of witnesses, and you kind of trade off. I actually saw more technical difficulties doing it that way than just everybody on their own computer in their own room. So it's a little bit scary to separate everybody at first, but that's one of the other beauties of this is that you now have more communication between attorneys and witnesses, specifically if you all get in the same group, the same text chat or what have you. That's one plus of doing it on Zoom is that you all have that communication.
I think the biggest thing that we learned was that you really need to think ahead about how you're going to put all of this into play, right? How is it? Are we going to have all of the attorneys or witnesses in the same room, like you said, and rotating one computer? Are they going to be on, 6 different laptops or computers? And of course, the one thing that you're going to be at the mercy of is you have to be in a place that has good Wi-Fi, right? Or somebody connected to an Ethernet, because that is going to matter. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's more than just a pain to deal with. I mean, you really need to plan these things out. The other things that you're going to want to think about are the lighting, the acoustics of where you're at. How is it that you're going to, transmit sound? Are you using the computer's built-in microphone? Just finding where the camera is. Some laptops, I know it's in the bottom corner, which creates an issue. So those are things you have to worry about, to think about. We'll talk about two backgrounds. It's not just in a courtroom. Now you're going to deal with what do these people have in their homes or rooms, or are you going to use virtual backgrounds? As Ben mentioned, how do you communicate amongst your team? I can tell you out of the gate right now, don't use the Zoom chat. You're going to have to figure that out. How do you talk? Well, you can't just whisper to each other. And even if you're in the same room, you're going to have to worry about hot mics, right? So there's timekeeping, and how are you going to communicate the times to the people who are on the screen, because they're looking at the screen, they're not looking at the timekeeping. And then, how do you plan to show exhibits, demonstrative aids, all of those things. So I think one of the things you really need to think about ahead of time is that this is not, again, mock trial on Zoom. You really have to embrace, think about, use to your advantage the Zoom medium. And if you do that, you'll have success. And if you do that, you will definitely be above your competition who are fumbling their way through it. So take the time to think about it, or I suppose just, right, that's what we're doing here. We're going to give you what we learned in these 3 episodes here on Zoom mock trial.
Maybe the best advice is just to do a Zoom mock trial scrimmage and just see what happens. One thing you'll notice immediately is faces are bigger. You are staring at someone's face that takes up the entire screen sometimes. So everything's magnified. Poker face facial expressions are magnified. Anything reflective like glasses or picture frames in the back, if they reflect the screen, they can show if you've got a script up or if you've got the Zoom interface up. So be aware of reflective surfaces if you're going to look at scripts. Obviously, if you're looking at scripts and your eyes are moving, that's another thing you can see when people are reading. So the advice here is not to have a script up. Obviously, it's tempting because no one knows what's on your screen unless you reflect again. But the advice is not to have anything up, just have the Zoom up. But with that, like Neal said, don't look at people's eyes on Zoom, look at your webcam. That way it looks like you're looking the judges in the eyes, so to speak. The webcam is where you want to look. Speaking of judges, we want to talk about the biggest thing. I mean, when I started judging these, I judged AMTA's One Last Time tournament. That was the first Zoom mock trial tournament that I can remember of happening across the country. It was really hard for me to pay attention the entire time. I had rounds where I presided, so I was on camera. That was helpful because if I started to drift off, I don't want to drift off. I don't want to offend the students. And it was easy to stay engaged because I had to listen to make rulings. But when I scored, it was really difficult to pay attention. My camera's off. No one's looking at me. And I'm just kind of passively listening. It's really easy to turn that camera off, keep the round on, and just kind of go about your life. So keeping judges' attention is much more difficult in Zoom than it is in real life.
I was involved both with that tournament and trial by combat and dealing with those kind of things. And so it is very easy that when you know no one's watching you to look at your phone that you would never do when you're in the courtroom, to deal with your pets, your children, whatever it is that these judges have going on in their life. You can totally turn off your brain and kind of give yourself permission. Oh, I'm listening. But you're not listening to the level that you would be if you were in a courtroom and you had nowhere else to go and nothing else to listen to. And so to circle back a little bit on what Ben was saying too about the reading, you're absolutely going to notice when people are reading, and that's one thing that you'll take off for, right? Because you're trying to find some way to score in this Zoom world of mock trial. And so, we've seen judges critique people pretty harshly for reading scripts because they can see it, because it's something they can affirmatively point to as this is happening. And they don't have to pay attention the whole time just to see that. So what we found is to keep the judges engaged, to try to keep them listening while their cameras are off. You want to sort of keep it simple, stupid kind of process here. You want less hyper technical law arguments, less nuanced theories and arguments, and you want more entertainment. You want more fact-based presentations, because if they're not listening the whole time, or they think they are, but they're really not because their phone is going off, you want something they can pick up really quickly and know what's going on with the case when they don't get to hold exhibits, when they don't get to see things as much as they would in a real trial.
I would just assume that at some point, every judge is going to stop listening to you. You make that assumption in real life, like a judge, zones out for a second, they come back in. But this is much more severe. Keeping it very simple allows the judge to hop back in whenever they've come back from their departure and come right back into the through line, the story from what you're trying to explain. To get them back in, you're going to need to entertain. You're going to need to spice something up. You're going to have to make it sound more entertaining than Facebook is on their phone. That'll help with Zoom fatigue. We've all experienced Zoom fatigue. I'm tired of being on webcams. I'm tired of meetings on webcams and all that kind of stuff, but it's still going on. So we need to combat that with the entertainment factor. One thing that is extremely difficult to pull off, but helps with entertainment and grabbing attention, is tone variations and certain characterizations of witnesses. That is very difficult on Zoom. You need to play this off like it is absurd in real life. It needs to be way more exaggerated than it was in real life. Short and sweet. Even if you have extra time at the end of the case in chief, as long as you get the story out Remember, it's a speech competition, okay? As long as you get the story out and you make a good, honest effort to hit the elements or present a defense case, you'll be fine. But the biggest thing here is don't get lost in tedium. Don't get lost in little stuff. Have a really broad brushstroke kind of theory and story that you're telling throughout that's very simple. So when the judges zone out and zone in, they can kind of keep track of what's going on.
I agree. It is essentially mock trial on TV without any ability to zoom in for cameras, for tiers, to sell things with music. You have to make sure that you're entertaining, entertaining, entertaining. We cut things down short, sweet, felt over the top, but it's working. The scores are higher. You have to make sure you use technology to your advantage. Embrace the fact that you are in Zoom. This is, again, not just mock trial through Zoom. When you're dealing with embracing the technology, what I'm talking about is you need to make sure with your exhibits, you're zooming in, you're highlighting. If you can, pull out a line that you're talking about to make it something that they can see, because judges time and time again are saying, look, we don't have these in our hands. We can't read them ourselves. And if you throw something up on the screen that has a lot of text, it's lost. And you can't just assume that they're going to be able to read it in the time that it's up on the screen, that they're not going to be able to go back and review these things. And so without that hard copy, judges are saying, look, you need to highlight these things. It needs to pop. It needs to be clear. Don't try to put a lot of text on the screen if you want them to be able to follow it. Consider if your organizations will let you using PowerPoint slides to make animation. Again, it's entertainment. It helps break things up, and it can help things pop a little bit more than dense testimony or just a lot of text on the screen. All that being said, judges have said we would like exhibits to be used more. I mean, as much as you don't like having your face plastered up there the whole time under the lights, they also don't like staring at it, right? As Ben said, Zoom fatigue is real. And so if you can give them exhibits, things to look for that have a purpose, that will augment your performance, I recommend doing it. Just make sure that it's clear what you're doing. The other thing that you're going to want to do, as Ben said, right, test this stuff out certainly before you get there. You want to make sure that your cameras and sound quality are very high. Check them before the rounds. It's a small thing, but if you can see the person clearer, if you can hear them better, the scores tend to go up. We played with different mics. We played with ring lights. We played with various quality cameras. And it didn't seem to matter as much that, students were in a dorm room or their kitchen, as much as can they be heard and seen? Is the lighting good? Remember, it's a speech contest. And the last thing I'd like to say for technology to your advantage, devote a team member to be in charge of the technology, right? Showing exhibits so that you don't have to worry about your competitors dealing with that. So if you have that ability, you have an extra person on the team who's maybe not going that round to be the person that's going to switch back and forth, takes the stress off of the people that are actually on camera at all times.
Okay, so we've covered everything for general Zoom mock advice. Your basic points are keep it really simple. Judges don't want to pay attention anymore, or they can get away with not paying attention is maybe a better way to say that. So you have to keep it simple, keep it entertaining, use the technology to get them in, highlight exhibits, augment exhibits, blow up exhibits, put them on a PowerPoint slide so that non-competing member can click through them really easily so you don't have these technical issues that throw off the presentation of your testimony. In the next two episodes, we are going to touch on our tips and tricks for attorneys and witnesses separately. Of course, it's always nice to know what the witnesses are doing from the attorney's perspective and vice versa. So watch them both, but we're going to tailor our advice to those roles in the next two episodes.